Masechet Baba Mesia Daf Kof Bet, a new Mishnah about the rights and responsibilities of landlords and tenants. Hamaskir bait lachavero, hamaskir chaya badelet, baneged ubamanul. B'chol davar shema'aseh uman, aval davar she'eno ma'aseh uman, hasocher osehu. Someone rents out a house to the tenant. So who's responsible for upkeep and repairs? It depends. The landlord is responsible to make sure that there's a door, a bolt, a lock, and anything that requires an expert, a craftsman, a professional to come and fix. So that would include nowadays, plumbing, and you need something an electrician, the only electrician can do. So something that you'd have to hire someone to do to take care of that in the house. The owner is responsible. However, if it's something that anybody can do, just a small thing, change a light bulb, just fix a little thing, and the tenant himself can do it, so then the tenant himself is responsible to take care of that, because you don't have to hire a professional for that. It makes sense. Hazeber shel bal habayit ve'en lasocher ela hayoseh min hatanur min hakirayim bilbad. Now, if next to the house there's a courtyard, we're going to talk about in the Gemara who owns the court. Well, if the courtyard is rented out or not. We'll see if the courtyard is not rented out. So therefore, any manure that is in the courtyard from animals there, that's valuable as fertilizer. It belongs to the landlord because the renter did not only rented the house, not the courtyard. And the renter, only thing he can keep is ashes that are from the oven and the stove. That's ashes could also be used as fertilizer, and so this would be an oven or a stove that is out in the courtyard that the renter is using, even though it's in the courtyard, but he is using the stove, producing those ashes, and therefore he's allowed to keep those ashes. Tenora banan, hamaskir bayit lachavero, maskir hayav lamid lo delatot, liftoch lo chalonot, lechazek lo tikra, lismoch lo kora, vesocher chayav la'asot lo sulam, la'asot lo ma'akeh, la'asot lo marzeb, ulatiach et gago. A Braita expands on the Mishnah and says that it's the landlord who is someone who rents out a house to his friend. The landlord is responsible to make sure that the doors are installed, to open windows. Windows in those days were just a hole in the wall, and then you'd block it up with a piece of wood or a stone, but to make sure that there are windows so that you can get light into the house, to support the ceiling, to make the beams strong. These are all things that you require a professional to do, so that's why the landlord is responsible. However, the renter is responsible to have a ladder if he wants to get up onto the roof, or if there's a second floor. So he can go get a ladder to provide a fence around the roof, and to put gutters to take away the rain, and to plaster the roof. They probably would have to plaster the roof like every rainy season, and so that's something that he can do himself. They didn't have the professional roofers to come and do that, and therefore these are things that the renter is obligated to take care of himself. Question, what about affixing a mezuzah? Who is responsible for that? And then we ask a question on that question. Mezuzah, ha'amar Rab Mesharshia, mezuzah chobat hadarhi, ela mekom mezuzah al mi. Wait, you're asking about mezuzah? We know the answer to that. Rab Mesharshia says that this is the one who lives there. Whoever's living there, that would be the renter. He has to make sure to buy a mezuzah from the sofer, and put it up on the doorpost. So that's not that we know the answer. Rather, we were talking about the place where they put the mezuzah. So they used to put the mezuzah. They used to make an indentation into the doorpost, and then put the scroll inside. So that indentation, that's not such an easy thing to make. So is that the responsibility of the landlord to get someone to make that indentation? Amar lehu Rav Sheshet tinitu hadavar shel ma'aseh uman hasocher osehu. V'hainameh la ma'aseh uman hu efshar hu begupta dekanya. Rav Sheshet said, I have an answer to this from the principle that we learned in our Mishnah, that if something does not require a professional, scroll, then the renter has to take care of it. And this does not require a professional, because you don't have to put the scroll inside a hollow in the wall, but rather you can put it in a reed and attach the reed onto the doorpost, on top of it, like we do today. We put the scroll inside a case, and we put the case right on top of the doorpost, and most people don't burrow a hole into the doorpost. And that's something easy that the renter can do, and therefore it's the renter's responsibility. Tenora banan, hamaskir ba'ed l'chavedo ala socher lasot mezuzah, u'kshu yoseh lo yitelenna biyado v'yoseh, menochri notla biyado v'yoseh, ma'aseh be'achad shenetala biyado v'yasa, v'kabad ishto u'shne banav. Since we're talking about renters and mezuzot, here's another law about that. Someone rents out a house to his friend, and so the renter has to put up the mezuzah, as we just said. Now, when he leaves, when the rental is over, he may not take the mezuzah with him and leave, because he should leave it there for the owner, if the owner is going to move in, or the next tenant, if the next tenant is Jewish and will also require a mezuzah, and therefore he should leave it there. Now, he is allowed to demand payment for the mezuzah. So the mezuzah cost me $100, so you might give me $100 for this mezuzah that you're using. That's fine. Yes, he can ask for payment, but he should not take it down and leave the house without a mezuzah on it. That's halakha till today. However, if he's renting it from a non-Jew, then he can take it. The non-Jew doesn't need and probably doesn't want the mezuzah there, and is probably just going to throw it out or mistreat it, and so therefore he should take the mezuzah with him and leave. Now, there's a story about someone, a renter, who took the mezuzah after he was done, and he left, and he buried his wife and 2 sons as punishment for taking the mezuzah. Now we ask, Ma'aseh listor, this story seems to contradict the law. You just told me that when you leave, if a non-Jew owns it, then you're allowed to take the mezuzah. So this guy, he took the mezuzah. So what did he do wrong? Poor guy. Now he lost his wife and children. Amar Rav Sheshet Aresha. Rav Sheshet explains that the story is going on the beginning, where he rented it from a Jew, or the Jew was going to be the next tenant, and he knew that, and nevertheless he took the mezuzah with him, and that was pretty dire consequences because of that. Okay, hazebel shel bal habayit ve'en lasocher ela hayoseh min hatanur min hakiraim belbad. So now the Mishnah said that manure that animals produce in the courtyard of the house belong to the owner, and the renter can only keep ashes that come from the oven and the stove for fertilizer. Now, what are the details of the case? If we're talking about a case where the renter rented not only the house but also the courtyard, and the oxen also belong to the renter, then why should the landlord get them? The land is now under his control, and the oxen are his, so he should keep the manure. So is it the opposite, that the courtyard was not rented out and the oxen belong to the landlord? Well, then everything's of the landlord. That's obvious that the landlord will keep the manure. So that doesn't make sense either. Rather, the Mishnah must be dealing with a case where the courtyard belongs to the landlord. The renter did not rent the courtyard, but the animals are not his. They're not nobody's. These are animals that were just wandering around from elsewhere, and they happened to wander into this particular courtyard and produce manure there. And so in that case, I might have thought that, well, since the animals belong to nobody, or not neither party, they belong to someone else that person doesn't care about the manure, and so I might have thought that the renter can go and collect the manure because it came from a random animal, and therefore the Mishnah comes to teach us not so. Once it lands in the courtyard of the landlord, right? Just by being in the courtyard of the landlord, that makes an acquisition. And from here, we can find support for the following halacha. Mesia led Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina Damar, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina chasero shel adam kona lo shelo mida'ato. This supports the law of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina that a person's courtyard can acquire for him anything that comes into his courtyard, that lands there, is his, even without his knowledge. Even though the landlord is not even there, doesn't even know about it, the courtyard is like an extension of his own hand. It's his property. And so therefore, these animals that come from elsewhere and produce manure on his courtyard, even though he doesn't know about it, that it's acquired for him and the renter cannot take it. Now we're going to challenge Rabbi Yosef's rule. Im amar kol mesiot she'yavou letocho hayom tikne li chaseri lo amar kelum. V'imita l'ha de'amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina chasero shel adam kona lo shelo mida'ato amai lo amar kelum. We have a braita that says if a person who owns a courtyard, he says any lost items, in other words, if something, an animal happens into this courtyard, it's a lost animal, no, it doesn't belong to anybody, and comes into my courtyard today, I want my courtyard to acquire it. I want that. If he says that, it doesn't do anything, has no legal effect. Now we ask, if it's true what Rabbi Yosef said, that someone's courtyard can acquire for him, even though he's not even there and doesn't even know about it, then why do you say it has no legal significance? It should work. And the answer is, this baraita is talking about a case of a courtyard that is not secured. It doesn't have a fence around it, and anyone can come in and out, and therefore, if it's not secured, then it will not acquire that which is in it. That's what he's talking about. But Rabbi Yosef was talking about a courtyard that is enclosed, and it will keep in whatever is in there, and therefore, like if an animal wanders in, it'll keep it inside. That kind of courtyard that's enclosed will acquire on his behalf. Now, if it's true that the Resha is talking about a courtyard that is not enclosed, then how will you explain the continuation of that very baraita? The Sefer says that if there's a true rumor that was spread throughout the city that a lost item went into this guy's courtyard, maybe a deer that can't walk and it ended up in his courtyard, or maybe the river overflowed and some fish ended up in his courtyard, then his words when he said, I want my courtyard to acquire, will take effect. So because everybody heard about it, presumably the owner also heard about it, so it's with his knowledge. So now if it's with his knowledge, then the Beraita says, so it works, it's his. Now we ask, if there's no fence around it, it's not secured, then even if there's the knowledge of this spread throughout the town, so what? How can he acquire something in a courtyard that is not secure? So the answer is, because the knowledge of that this lost item is there, spread throughout the city, so the other people in the city are going to keep away from it. They're going to it's in that guy's courtyard, all right, so it's his, and they're not going to take it. Since they're not going to take those fish that landed there, so therefore it's the same as a secured courtyard. So the way to secure a courtyard usually is to have a fence so nobody comes in. But in this case, it's also secured just by the fact that everybody knows, oh, it's in his courtyard. He said, if anything falls in to my courtyard, I want it, and everybody stays away. So then that is the same as being secured, and that explains why, in that case, his courtyard does take effect. But we answered the questions, and so Rabbi Yosef's ruling is still valid, that a person's courtyard can acquire something even without his knowledge, as long as it's secured. Metibe. זה בל היוצא מן התנור ומן הכיריים, והקולט מן האוויר הרי הוא שלו, ושברפת ושבחסר של בעל הבית. ואמיתא להד רבי יוסף רבי חנינא, דבר חסרו של אדם קונה לו, שלא מדעתו, קולט מהאוויר, עמי הרי הוא שלו, אוויר חסרו הוא. We now have another challenge against Rabbi Yosef from a baraita that teaches that refuse from an oven or a stove, meaning ashes, that was going to belong to the renter, as the Mishnah already said, and also that which is collected from the airspace. This is referring to animals that come in and they produce manure, but the renter collects it in a pail before it reaches the ground, right? He goes and he puts a pail under the animal, and so it's in the airspace of the courtyard, but it didn't yet touch the ground, and therefore the renter can keep it. However, manure that is found in the cowshed or in the courtyard on the floor, that belongs to the landlord. Now here's the challenge. If it's true what Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina said, that a person's courtyard can acquire for him even without his knowledge, that which is caught from the airspace, why does it belong to the renter? The airspace of a courtyard is also part of the courtyard, and therefore should belong to the landlord. So even though he went and the renter put a pail under it, but before it fell into the pail, it was in the airspace of the landlord's courtyard, then landlord should therefore own it. Amar Abaye b'madbi keli b'shule para. Abaye says we're talking about a case where the pail was attached to the cow. He actually attached the pail to the cow's rear, so that is part of the cow, and therefore that's not called going into the airspace. That's called that the renter collected it directly. But you're right, if it was not attached and you just put it down under, then it would be in the airspace and the landlord would collect it. That's Abaye's answer. Another answer, Rava Amar, Avir shen sofo lanuach lav kemunach dameh. Rava said it could even be that the renter is holding the pail, or the pail is on the floor, and still the renter would get it, because when we say airspace collects something, that's only if it's in the airspace and it's falling and would touch the ground if you didn't do anything. There's nothing interposing. But if there's a pail underneath, even if it's it's not attached to the animal, so then that thing that's falling is not destined to land on the ground, and therefore anything that's in the air that is not going to come to rest on the ground is not considered as if it's resting on the ground, and therefore, as long as the renter collects it while it's in midair in his bucket, it belongs to the renter. Okay, so that's two answers. Umi peshita le Rava. Now we ask a question about Rava concerning what he himself thinks. Because over here it sounds like he thinks that as long as you catch something, the airspace does not collect it, and Rava seems to know that for sure. But in a different case, Rava had a question about this very topic. זרק ארנקי בפתח זה ויסעת בפתח זה מהו? אוויר שאין סופו לנוח כמונח טמא או לאו כמונח טמא. If someone threw a purse of money into a house and it went into the front door and right out the back door without landing in the house, does that person's house acquire that purse for him, as a courtyard would if it fell down into it? Or no, do we say that it passed right through and never landed and was not destined to land there, so that he does not acquire it, right? Do we say that airspace that is not going, that's flying through airspace and it's not going to come to rest, you follow the trajectory, is that like still, but it's still in the airspace and therefore it's like it is acquired, or is it not acquired? So we had a question about that. So how come over here he seems to know for sure that it's considered not acquired? And the answer is hatam la mifsak velamidi, hacham mifsak keli. In that case of the house, there was nothing interposing. It's just that from the momentum of the purse, it was flying through, but there was nothing between the purse and the floor of the house. And that's where he had a question. But where he has no question is when there is something interposing, meaning the pail. All right, the pail, it's the manure is dropping from the cow, and the pail is already there. And so, following the trajectory, it's going to go into the pail. And so, in that case, Rava knew for sure that airspace does not acquire if it's not destined to land on the ground, and there is something interposing. And next, v'shebarefet v'shebachaser hare elu shel balabayit. Tarte, in the Braita says, any manure that's in the cowshed and any manure that's in the courtyard belong to the landlord. Why do we need both? Right? Just say one. If the stuff in the courtyard belongs to him, then surely that which is in the cowshed of course belongs to the landlord. So just say one of them and I could figure out the other. Amar Abaye hachika amar v'shebarefet shebachaser. Take away the vav and read it just as one thing. The cowshed that's in the courtyard, hare elu shel bal habayit. So meaning only the manure that's in the cowshed, which is in the courtyard. Just because he rented out his house, he did not rent out his cowshed. Amar Rav Asher zot omeret hamaskir chasero stam lo iskir efet sheba. So we learn from here that if someone rents out their courtyard and said, here, you rent out the house, rent out the courtyard, but that does not include the cowshed that's in the courtyard. So that's the case we're talking about. He rented out his courtyard, and therefore that will go to the renter. But the cowshed is not included, and that's what the Mishnah was talking about when it said the cowshed that's in the courtyard. Metibeh, another challenge against Rabbi Yosef from a different Baraita. Yoneh shobach ve'yoneh aliyah chayavot b'shiluach v'asurot begezel mipnei darkei shalom. If one has doves in a dovecote or in an attic. In those days, some people would have doves in their house. They're called Herodian doves, and they're domesticated. And so then they would feed them and take care of them. So those that for sure they owned in the house. We're not talking about that. Rather, we're talking about wild doves. And so these would go out and scavenge in fields and places. But people would put a dovecote in their courtyard, or they would make these holes in their attic so that the doves would come and make nests there and deposit their eggs or chicks there. And then the owner, he doesn't own the birds, but they're in his courtyard, then he would go and collect them and enjoy them. So, the law regarding Shiluach Hakan is, Ki Ikare, the Pasuk says, if you happen upon a nest on the road. So the law only applies to things that you come upon that you don't own. Therefore, the Herodian doves in one's house, one does not have to send away the mother bird. You can just go and take the eggs and take the chick while the mother is right there. But if you don't own them, then you have to send away the mother bird. So in this case, it's kind of in between because he doesn't own the bird. It's a wild bird, but it's on his property. So the Baraita teaches that even though it's on his property, you have to send away the mother bird because it's a wild bird and you don't really own it. On the other hand, if somebody else from a different a neighbor wants to come and take, we'll talk about is it the mother or the eggs or the chicks, he wants to take them. After all, these are wild birds. They don't belong to him. So from a Deoraita level, a neighbor can take them because they're wild birds. They don't belong to anybody. However, this will lead to fighting because the guy where the dovecote is, the courtyard owner, he will say, "Oh, they're in my courtyard, right? I want to take them. My plan is to have them for myself." And so therefore, for the sake of peace, we say, listen, if these birds are making a nest in this guy's attic or this guy's courtyard dovecote, then he should have them, and the neighbor, you're not allowed to take them. That is the Baraita. Now here's the challenge. If we follow the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina that a person's courtyard acquires whatever's in the courtyard, even if he doesn't have knowledge of it, then we should apply here the derasha, that you only have to send away the mother bird if you happen upon it out in the wild. But if it's readily accessible, if it's yours, if you own it, then you do not have to. So now we have a bird. Okay, the bird is a wild bird, but it's coming and it's laying an egg right there in your attic. That's on your property. So the second that it lays the egg, now it's in your property, then you should acquire it. And therefore, you shouldn't have to send away the mother bird because it's not out in the wild, it's your own egg. That's the question. Amarava besa bisiat rubahu de'i chayeba la beshiluach. Umikna la kanyad de nafla la chasero. Prikatani chayot beshiluach mikabeti tipol la chasero. Rava said that this braita is not talking about an egg that was already finished being laid and is already now there in the nest. But rather, it's talking about an egg that's only halfway out of the mother, because an egg becomes liable to this law that you have to send away the mother once the majority of it exits from the mother. However, the owner of the courtyard will not acquire it until it gets into his courtyard, meaning either it falls on the ground or even if it's falling midair, fine, the airspace will acquire it. But if it still hasn't fallen from the mother yet, then the courtyard does not acquire it for him. And so that's what this is talking about, and that's why he has to send away the mother bird. I'm not sure how he's going to do that. Send away the mother bird, but also try to catch the egg out while it's because it's more than halfway out, but it's still attached to the mother. So he has to somehow get the egg just in time as the mother bird goes away. But it's before it falls into his courtyard. That's what the Baraita is talking about in order to reconcile it with Rabbi Yosef. Iman. If so, then why do you say that the eggs are forbidden from robbery? How come a neighbor can't come and take those eggs? After all, they didn't land in the nest yet. They're still attached to the mother, so anyone should be able to come and take them. And the answer is no. When we talked about that, we're talking about the mother, because the owner of the courtyard has in mind, I'm going to want the mother one day. One day if it finishes laying eggs and he's ready, he will take the mother and eat it. And so he has in mind, and that's what it's talking about. Or you can also say that is in fact talking about the eggs, that a neighbor cannot come and take them even before they landed in his nest in his courtyard, because once a majority of the egg comes out, already the owner has in mind, that's going to be my eggs, I'm going to take them. And even though technically, legally, he doesn't acquire them yet because they have not fully emerged, but because of Darkei Shalom, because he has in mind that he's going to take them and we don't want people to start fights, so we say, you know what, don't take it from him. That would be stealing midrabanan. Vashtama damar Rav Yehuda amar Rav, asur lizkot bebesim kol zman she'em robeset alehem, shenemar shalech teshalech et ha'em, vehadar et habanim tikach lach, afilu tema denafla lach lechasero, kol echad ihu maseh zachi le, chasero zachia le, v'chol echad ihu la maseh zachi le, chasero nameh la zachia le. And now we're going to bring a ruling of Rav by which we can explain the Braita in a simpler way. We're not going to need the Okimta of Rava that is talking about a case where the egg is 51% of the way out, and therefore he has to do a Shiluach Hakan because he didn't acquire it yet, because it didn't fall down, it's still in the part of the mother in terms of acquisition, so he didn't acquire, so therefore it's still a wild bird, but he does have to do a Shiluach Hakan because 51% of the way out. That was a very difficult interpretation. According to the following ruling of Rav, we can explain simply that the mother totally laid the egg. How so? Rav says that a person may not acquire the egg as long as the mother bird is still there. While the mother bird is on it, lay the egg and is still there, it asserts her control over it, and therefore nobody owns that egg. It's the mother's. She's right there. How do we know that? Shene'emar, Pasuk says, first send away the mother bird. Only then can you acquire the chicks or the eggs. And therefore, we can say this Braita is even talking about a case where the mother came and laid the egg totally, and it's there in a nest on the person's courtyard, and the person will not acquire it, the courtyard owner, because only if he himself can acquire it, then his courtyard can acquire it. But if he himself cannot acquire it, and he's not allowed to acquire it because the mother bird is still on it, therefore his courtyard does not acquire it. Therefore, it's still considered a nest in the wild, and that's why he is liable to do shiluach haken, even though we follow the biyoseh that a person's courtyard acquires for him. But in this case, before he sends it away, he himself is not allowed to acquire the egg, even monetarily, and therefore it's an egg in the wild, a bird in the wild, and therefore we can follow the biyoseh and still understand this braita perfectly well. But now we ask, well, how do we explain the next ruling of the Baraita that says that nobody else besides that courtyard owner can come and take the egg, and if he does, that would be theft midirabanan, because of the ways of peace. So what would be the case if someone else came and sent away the mother bird? Well, you see, the second he sends away the mother bird, the courtyard of the courtyard owner will acquire it for him. And in that case, that would be outright theft mideoraita. And if the neighbor came and didn't send away the mother bird, well, then he's violating the law of taking an egg without sending away the mother bird. So what could be the possible case that would violate darkei shalom? And the answer is bekatan de la bar shiluachu. We're talking about a minor who came from a neighboring place, and he came, and since a minor is not liable in mitzvot yet, so he doesn't have to send away the mother bird. Yet, if he takes so he doesn't send away the mother bird, he just reaches in while the mother is there and takes the egg. If he does that, so that would not be theft mideoraita, since the mother bird is there, the courtyard owner does not yet acquire it, and therefore he, on a doraita level, would be able to take it, and that's why the Baraita says, for darkei shalom, he should not take it, because the courtyard owner has in mind that he's going to eventually want to go there, and then it's going to start a fight. Now, katan bar darkei shalom, hold on, if it's a minor who is not liable in the Torah law, surely is also not liable in the Derabanan ruling of darkei shalom. So if it's a minor, then he can go and take it while the bird is there, and he's not responsible for anything. And the answer is hachikamar aviv shel katan chayav lachazir lo mipnei darkei shalom. Well, yes, true, the minor we can't hold responsible for anything, but the minor is taking it on behalf of his father. And so his father is going to come and say, where'd you get this egg? Oh, I got it from next door over there from that dovecote with the bird sitting on it. So the father says, oh, but the bird was sitting on it. The minor says, well, I'm a minor. It's okay. I don't have to follow that law. But then the father says, yeah, but the owner of the courtyard is expecting that he's going to take it. And therefore, it's going to start a fight. So it's true, the minor is not responsible for anything, but the father is responsible to return the egg to the owner, so that there will be peace. Next Mishnah. Hamaskir bayit lachavero l'shana, nit'abera hashana, nit'abera lasocher. Hiskir lo lechodashim, nit'abera hashana, nit'abera lamaskir. In those days, they didn't have a fixed calendar like we do today. We can predict out for future decades what years will have only 12 months and which years will have an extra Adar and will be 13 months. In those days, they decided year by year, they would look and see how the season is, how the crops are, and decide before Adar whether they're going to add another Adar, before Nisan, whether they're going to add another Adar or not. And therefore, if someone rents out a house to his friend, and the terms are, I'm renting it out to you for 1 year for a certain price. And then, in the middle of the year, turns out it was nit'abera, literally a pregnant year, an extra long year, 13-month year. Well, then the renter benefits because the renter pays the same amount. It was the amount that he paid for 1 year, and he gets to live there for an extra month. On the other hand, if when they defined their terms, they said, okay, we're going to pay by the month, then, right, this amount per month. In that case, if it turns out that the year became 13 months, so the landlord benefits because the renter has to pay for 13 months instead of only 12 for the full year. There was a case in the northern city in Israel, in Sipori, someone who rented a bathhouse from someone else. And the terms they agreed on were ambiguous. They said it will be 12 gold coins for the year. And that comes to 1 dinar per month. So they said both. They said both the amount per year and the amount per month. And then and then it became an intercalated year. Was added another month. And so now what do we do? So the case came to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Yosef, and they said that the landlord and the renter should split that extra month, and the renter has to pay half a golden coin for it. Now we ask, Maaseh listor, it seems that this story is contradicting the law that we said before, because in the law we said before, well, I don't know which category does it fall into. If he said, per the year, then the renter does not have to pay. If it's per month, then he does have to pay. But here it says he only pays a half. So that seems to contradict either of the rulings that we just had. And the answer is, you have to read the Mishnah as if it's missing the following words that you'd have to add in to make it clear that's actually talking about 3 cases. You have the first case where they said by the year. The second case where they defined the terms by the month. And now there is a third case that says if they said 12 coins for the year, and they also added a second clause, which is 1 coin per month, well then that's ambiguous, so they have to split it. And in fact, now we have a story that supports exactly that. Exactly such a story happened in Sipori with someone who rented a bathhouse for 12 golden coins for the year, 1 golden coin per month, and the case came before the sages, and they said you have to split it. You have to split that 13th month. Amarav. Rav says, I disagree with this ruling. If I was a judge there, I would have given the entire month to the landlord and make him pay. Make the renter pay for the entire amount of that extra month. Now, why would Rav say that? Tefos leshon acharon. It must be that Rav says when you say a double statement that are contradictory, then you go by the last one, because probably the last one is clarifying what you actually meant. And when you started, so you said one thing. You said this month's per the year, but the last thing that you say has more authority. That's more that you probably are clarifying what you really want to do, and therefore, since the last thing that they said was 1 gold coin per month, then he has to pay 13 gold coins. If you flipped it around and the last thing he said was 12 for the year, then it would follow the year, and then the renter would not have to pay. Amar Rav hada zimna. But the problem with that is that Rav already said a different ruling that teaches us that methodology that you always follow the second phrase. And so why would Rav need to teach us another law that has the same principle? I could have figured it out from the following. Damar Rav Huna Amri be Rav. Astira mea ma'e mea ma'e. Mea ma'e astira astira. Rav Huna reported from the Bet Midrash of Rav that if someone says, I'll pay you in astira, that's a Greek stater coin, that is actually worth 96 ma'ot. So someone says, I'll pay you 100, I'll pay you in astira, and then he says 100 ma'ot, so he has to pay 100 ma'ot, because that's the second thing he said. If on the other hand he says, I'll pay you 100 ma'ot in astira, then what he means in astira. So in both cases, they're kind of close, and he said the second thing is clarifying precisely what he meant, and that's why we always go by the second phrase. So we already know that Rav says you go by the second phrase. Why? So he should have just said that. Why would Rav have to say regarding a different law to this law here if we know the principle already? And the answer is, if I only had this case, I would say that he's clarifying what he meant, and he's saying, oh, astira, what I mean by that is 100, or 100, what I mean by that is an astira. In the case where it's a clarification, then we'll follow the last thing. But if it's in a case where it's a contradiction, and in our case, really it's a contradiction, because 1 per month is not the same as 12 per year, right? These are actually come out to different things when there's a 13-month year. And so I might have thought that it would not apply when the two things are contradictory, and that's why Rav had to come and tell us, if I was there, I would have ruled according to the second phrase, even in this case where they're contradictory. It means the person is basically correcting himself, even if he's not explaining himself. Oh, I know, I said 12 per year. What I mean really is 1 per month, no matter how many months there will be. And now we see the opinion of Shemuel, who agrees with the ruling in the Mishnah of Rashbag and Rabbi Yosef that you split it, and he's going to explain why they said that. Shmuel says they were talking about a case where the landlord comes to court, brings the renter to court in the middle of the month, on the 15th. And that's why, since half the month already passed, and so the renter was already there, so now they can't make the renter pay for that half of the month, because that would be mosim machavero ala v'ra'aya. And on the other hand, the coming month, he can make him pay for, because the land is in possession of the landowner, and landowner can say, you prove that you need to be here, that you have a right to be here. If you can't prove it, you have to pay me for the rest of the month. In other words, Shemuel is not sure about what Rav was sure about. Rav says you follow the second statement. Shemuel says, I don't know if you follow the first statement or the second statement. It's up for grabs. There's a doubt about this. And since there's a doubt, and no one can prove their case absolutely, whether they meant a full year or month by month, therefore we're going to apply Hamosim Machavero ala v'ra'aya. Hamosim Machavero, that would mean it depends when you come. If the landlord would come at the beginning of the month, he is in possession of the land, and now this renter wants to take something by staying there for the whole month. So he can't prove that this is what they meant, and therefore he has to pay for the full month. If it's at the end of the month, so now the renter already got that benefit, and now the landowner wants to take another gold coin from him, so that he's the motzi. He cannot prove it. If they come in the middle, then they split it proportionally to how much of the month went by. Mi amar Shemuel lo amrina tefos lashon acharon. Now, according to Shemuel, he says we don't follow the second, we don't follow the first or the second. It's up for grabs. It's just in doubt. But is that true that Shemuel did not agree with Rav that we take the last thing, the last phrase of what was said? Rav Ushmael damret harvaihu. Kol b'shloshim ani mochel lecha yachol lachzor bo afilu b'se'a acharona. Kol b'shloshim se'a b'se'a ani mochel lecha rishon kana. Here, look, Rav and Shemuel both agree in a case where someone sells to someone else a cord. A cord is 30 se'ah. He sells a cord of wheat for 30 selah. Okay, so a cord happens to be 30 se'ah. He's selling 30 se'ah for 30 selah. So it's pretty clear that he's selling 1 se'ah per sela, but they didn't say 1 se'ah per sela. He said the whole cord for 30. And in that case, before he actually doles out the last se'ah, he delivered 29, but not the last one, they can renege on the deal because it wasn't fully delivered. It says, listen, it wasn't delivered yet, so therefore, without full delivery, the transaction has not been completed, and so then the seller can say, oh, you know what? I changed my mind. Okay, because he didn't fulfill it. However, if they use different language, if he says a double language, a cord for 30 selah, and then he added 1 se'ah per selah I am selling to you. In that case, we follow the second phrase, and for every se'ah he delivers, the acquisition is final. And so if he delivers 29, all 29 of those are final. He can renege on the last one, but not on the previous ones. And Shemuel agrees with that. So you see that Shemuel seems to agree that with Rav, that you follow the last phrase. And we answer, no. Hatam ta'amamai mishum de tafis hachaname katafis. Even though Rav and Shemuel agree on the final verdict, actually for different reasons. Rav would say this is true because we follow the last phrase. But Shemuel would say, no, it's because the buyer already took hold of all that grain. So anything that he took hold of, now he is in possession of. So the seller would have to go prove that what he meant is the whole thing. And since he can't prove that, so he can't take that back. On the other hand, the last se'ah, the buyer cannot get because he has not taken acquisition of that yet. So actually, this ruling of Shemuel is consistent with what Shemuel said above, that we apply hamosim chavero alav hade'aya. And now, one more opinion about the case of the Mishnah. Rav Nachman amar karka becheskat be'aleha kayemet. Rav Nachman says that the land stays in the possession of the owner, and therefore the landowner, since the land is in his possession, he can extract another coin and make the renter pay. Now this happens to agree with Rav. So we ask, what is Rav Nachman adding? Oh, I think, well, he said the same thing as Rav. So just say, okay, halacha kerav. Right? Why is he saying it something as if like he's saying a chidush here? Right? If he's just teaching that we follow the last phrase, Rav already said that. And the answer is afagav da pich me pach. No, Rav Nachman, he happens to agree with the final verdict, but for a different reason. And Rav Nachman would say that the renter has to pay for that extra month, even if they reversed the order of the statement. It doesn't matter what he said first and what he said second, he always has to pay, because we follow again, but according to Rav Nachman, unlike Shemuel, it doesn't matter when you come to court. That doesn't make the difference of the land is in the possession of the owner. He owns the land. And the renter, if he wants to not pay, the renter has to prove that he doesn't have to pay, that he already paid for that it's included, that the extra month is included in the terms. If he can't prove that, then he can't motzi mechavero, he can't stay there and live there without permission. And even if the 30 days, the full 13 months is already done, it doesn't matter. He still has to prove that he had a right to be there, and if he cannot prove that, then he has to pay the rent, because we consider the owner of the land to have that chazakah, that it's his, until proven otherwise. We end with one more question about a new case. Be'o mineh merabi yanai, socher amar natati, umaskir amar lo natarti, al mi lehavi re'aya. Someone rented a house or field from someone else. Let's say they did it for a 1-month term. And now the renter says, I paid you. But the landlord said, I never received it. So who has to bring proof? So it relates to what we were talking about before, right? Do we consider the landowner as always having a chazakah, or the renter? So what do we do about this? Now we ask, emat. בתוך זמנו התננה. לאחר זמנו התננה, דתנן. מתה בתוך 30 יום בחזקת שלא נפתה, עד שהביא ראיה שנפתה. לאחר 30 יום בחזקת שנפתה, עד שיאמרו לו שלא נפתה. So we ask, when is what case are you talking about when you ask this question? If it's within the month, in general, rental, in times of Talmud, you have to pay the rent on the last day of the month, on the 30th day. That's when rent is due. So if the claim, he comes to court and claims during the month, we already learned that. And if it's after the month was finished, right, a day after, then we already learned that. We learned both of these laws in a Mishnah in Masechet Bechorot. This is talking about a father who has a firstborn son, and he has to do Pidyon Haben. The problem is that he dies within 30 days. Pidyon Haben, you only have to do once on the 31st day. You have to do it on that day. If you don't do it on that day, you have to do it afterwards, anytime you can. But the father died, and now the son, he grows up, and now he's not sure. Did my father do Pidyon Haben? Did he not do it? So what's his responsibility? So here's the law. If he died within the 30 days, the father, then you can assume that he didn't do it, because what he wouldn't. You don't do Pidyon Haben before 30 days, and unless you bring proof. See, if the father did do it, maybe he knew he was dying tomorrow, and so he did it before 30 days. Even though you're supposed to wait till 30 days, if you do it, but within 30 days, it still is effective. So then the son wouldn't have to do it anymore. Now, if the father died past the 30 days, then we can assume he did it. Unless there's proof, someone says, no, we were there, your father never did Pidyon Haben, then the son will have to do it. But you see from here that you follow the general presumption. Usually people aren't going to pay a financial obligation before it's due, and if after it's due, then we can presume that they did fulfill it, their financial obligation. And therefore the same thing here. When is this suit coming to the court, right? Is a landlord claiming it during the month? Well, then we presume that the renter did not pay, because most people aren't going to pay the rent earlier than they have to. And if it's after the month is over, then we should presume that the renter paid, unless the landlord brings proof. Of course, anyone who has proof, that's fine, then they can extract. But if no one has proof, then that would be the presumption, and to know who is the Motzi Mechavero. So what is your question? We solved all the questions, right? And the answer is La Sericha B'Yomad Mishlam Zimneh. The question was asked about, what about on that 30th day itself? Mi Avid Inish de Para B'Yomad Mishlam Zimneh Ola. Do we presume that people pay their rent or on that day in the morning, right? And let's say the suit is in the afternoon. So should we presume that, yeah, it's on this day, so we already paid? Or do people wait all the way till the day is over and then they pay the rent all the way at the end of the day? That's the question. Amar lehu Rabbi Yochanan tinituha. Rabbi Yochanan says, I have an answer for you. It's in a Mishnah that we are going to learn in a few dapim from now. The Mishnah says, Sachir bizmano nishba venotel. If a hired laborer, a day laborer comes to claim, he says, hey, you didn't pay me, he tells the boss. So the day laborer can make a vow that he was not yet paid, and he can collect his wages. And it says here, bizmano, that means on that very day. So we see here that he can collect on that very day if he claims that he was not paid. Now we're going to clarify about the vow. The answer is someone has to make a vow, and then that will clarify whatever that vow is. Now in this case, the laborer makes the vow. Now, Sachir hu d'ramud banan shibua aleh mishum deval habayit tarud bepo'alav. In this case, the person who's trying to collect money is the one that makes the vow, because the owner, the boss, he is busy with many workers. He has 50 workers, and he's not going to remember who he paid and who he didn't pay. So we're not going to ask the Baal Habayit to make the vow, because he probably doesn't remember very well. But the day laborer, he for sure knows whether he got paid or not. And that's why in this case, we have the person suing to collect money is the one that makes a vow. But it sounds like otherwise, in a standard case, it would be the person, the defendant would make a vow, vow and not pay. That's the standard obligation of a vow, is that the defendant makes a vow and doesn't pay. So aval hacha, in this case, shomer meheman b'shivu'ah. The renter, he knows, in this case, the renter will know if he paid out the money or not. So even though he's the one paying out, since he knows, he should make the vow. And so that's the answer. If it's on that very day, on the 30th day of the rental, when the rent is due, so this is a good question. Should we assume he already paid the rent in the morning? Do most people pay in the morning, or they wait till the end of the day? Oh, in this case, as long as the renter makes a vow that he paid, then that he already paid, then we believe him, and he does not have to pay again. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.